Hey everyone, welcome back to the Scaling Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Harper. My guest today is the one, the only, Eric Pacifici, co-founder of SMB Law Group and Twitter phenomenon, someone who made the jump from a very stable career in big law to complete entrepreneurship in a really bold way and did it basically through building a Twitter following.
People that I really care about and like and have gotten to know, trying to do things that I think are interesting, and no one will help them, and I have the skill set to help them. So let's see if we can make it work. And we didn't know, right? We were getting ready to launch, and I was in the shower, and I was, working for, one of the top 3 law firms in the world, and thinking I'm literally launching a law firm off of basically a Twitter account. This is either going to be the stupidest thing someone has ever done before, or, whatever. And it's been somewhere in between.
Eric was making great money as a corporate lawyer at one of the top firms in the country. But in this episode, he talks about why he gave it up to build something better, first for himself and now for thousands of small business buyers, doing over $1 billion in transactions since launching. If you're buying a business or thinking about it, this episode is for you. So make sure you tune in till the very end. All right, Eric, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to get to know you a little bit today. Obviously, I've followed you online. I think even since before I became an entrepreneur, have watched your business grow, which is the coolest thing about Twitter, and have watched you make this big kind of like leap from big law to Twitter micro influencer to entrepreneur to SMB person, and love to just kind of dig into that a little bit. You were doing, I think you were making like close to 7 figures as a lawyer. Like, why leave that? Like, why? Why would you leave that? And then talk to me about kind of like what happened.
Awesome. Good. Well, good to see you, man. Thanks for having me on the pod. I've been following you for some time as well and followed your journey. And so it's nice to connect with you in person and get to know you. But yeah, I mean, I made a good living as a corporate attorney, but there was a price to be paid with that, much like many of the people I suspect that you know and people in the entrepreneurial community that have made this big kind of life and cultural shift over the last couple of years. I think there's been a lot of people who weren't entrepreneurs or typically wouldn't become entrepreneurs that have become entrepreneurs in the last few years because of the pandemic and the internet and, access to things that people typically don't have access to. But my backstory, I was working for Kirkland and Ellis in 2022, which Kirkland is one of the top law firms in the world, really highly regarded for private equity M&A and for corporate transactions generally, and was making a good living, but the quality of life wasn't really there. It had improved to some extent during the pandemic because we had to work from home. And so, went from the commute to the downtown, high rise, 40 minutes in, 40 minutes out, racing to make bedtime, to not having to do that because, we were now working from home. And so, I was able to just walk upstairs and see my kids and have dinner, but still wasn't the dream lifestyle, right? When you're in a big machine like that, Kirkland's a big machine. You don't even have visibility to work that's coming down the pike, right? So like you have no control. And when it does come down, it'll be like a Thursday, and it's like, hey, we got to get this, couple $100 million transaction off the ground by Tuesday. So scrap your weekend plans. You didn't know it was coming. And I had worked for a really prolific M&A attorney early on in my career, and him and I went to lunch in I think my second or third year. And he said, one thing that he said stood with me forever, which was, he said he used to get anxious when he was early in his career, be like Tuesday, Wednesday, he had Saturday plans. Am I going to make the plans? Am I going to make the plans? And he goes, and one day, Aaron, you just stop making the plans and you just stop worrying about that kind of thing.
Wow.
And I thought, man, I don't want that life. That's not the quality of life that I want. That's not my definition of success. And so it became clear pretty early on that I had to figure out something else. I had no idea I'd do all this, to be clear, but was certainly looking for kind of an alternative lifestyle pretty early on in my career.
And I mean, I think you're solving a very specific problem Did you know that problem existed when you were at Kirkland and Ellis? And maybe you could talk about like what you do now and how that, like what that problem is that you're solving.
Which problem
in the
are you
SMB,
referring to?
like in the SMB community, right? Like there's a bunch of people that are trying to buy businesses, the ETA community, and like you solve a very unique problem. Like you provide, from my understanding, like a reasonable fee-based structure for transactions at SMB Law. It's not the same kind of old school law structure. Like maybe you could talk about it a little bit and like how you came to that.
Yeah, so we had the good fortune. So I launched SMB Law Group in 2022 alongside Kevin Henderson, who's in Dallas, who's fantastic, Cravath trained attorney, really smart guy, and Sam Rosati, who's in Tampa, who's a UVA educated attorney, very successful and prolific entrepreneur, well-known person also. We had the good fortune of having time to build and to scheme, but also most importantly is we had community behind us, lots of people through the internet and through the various kind of ETA clubs and whatnot to tell us exactly what they wanted from a firm, right? And so when we launched, Aaron, we literally we ran Twitter polls and talked to clients and people and friends that were in the space and said, what do you want from a law firm? Tell us what you want. And pretty much everybody said the same thing. They said they hate the billable hour. 90+% of people said they don't just dislike the billable hour, they hate the billable hour. They think it limits their ability to communicate with their attorney. They think it's inefficient. There's a small subset of people, which is an interesting thing, actually. Small subset of people who have really good relationships with their existing lawyers, know that their existing lawyer is busy, and know that their existing lawyer is not going to overbill them. And so they actually prefer the billable hour. So you've got kind of these two interesting dynamics to work in. But they told us, get rid of the billable hour. They also told us that they need protection in small business M&A deals from busted deal fees. And so if you could solve those two things, and they didn't tell us how to solve them. But we went to the drawing board with the problems and came up with what we thought were pretty good solutions. And now, which is actually fascinating, it'll be 3 years in May. There's a whole cottage industry that's been built on the back of that experience and that research and that pricing model. I mean, you go talk to any of our competitors and they're running exactly our pricing model. Now they can take our pricing model here, but they can't take our heart, but and our business model. But so it's evolved very interestingly. But what you learn, what's really fascinating as because I equate everything to college. We've been running this business now for 3 years. I get really impatient. I'm like, why aren't we moving faster? Why isn't it bigger? Yeah. And it's by and large, I was talking to somebody recently who's Rand Larson. Shout out to Rand. He runs different groups. And I was bemoaning to Rand.
Rand.
I was like,
him and I became,
Rand runs community, and I don't want to mischaracterize. Rand, if you're listening, if I've got this wrong, tell me I've got this wrong. But effectively, I was kind of telling him what's going on in our business, and I felt like I was whining, about all the different things. And kind of at the end, he was like, what are you complaining? Yeah, you got nothing to complain about, So I think we have as successful of a business as you can conceivably have in 2 years and 10 months. And obviously maybe that's not fair. We're not going to be Microsoft or Amazon or a $1 billion unicorn. So that's not true. There is definitely many, many businesses that are more successful than us. But in terms of what the average person could hope for when they endeavor into entrepreneurship, we've done very well. And yet I still feel, very much like we're behind at the 3-year mark. And you get into something like this and you don't know what you don't know until you've had the experience and the time and the learning. And so the whole thing's evolved, right? And it's one of the things I tell all the buyers now when they buy these businesses. I'm like, listen, it's great to have a thesis. It's great to want to innovate. It's great to bring fresh new ideas to a business, but also learn why the fences are there before you move them, right? And we started in a business and we just moved all the fences out of the way. And when we go to all the consultants and different business law firm coaches, because we were cognizant of the fact that we're lawyers and not business people, and thought, hey, let's go get some help. They all said the same thing to us. You got to go up market. You got to charge by the hour because you're going to need to know what your metrics are and economies, and that's how you maximize efficiency and productivity. And they're right. right? And it's very hard to run a business on the model that or scale a business on the model that we've done it on. But the flip side is then you go I was talking to a guy this week who has built a really successful firm over 16 years. Really successful firm. Fantastic guy. He's very successful. And he told me, he's like, in the next 10 years, we're going to do what you're doing. We're going to evolve into what you're doing, right? So it's a very fascinating moment in time for the legal profession, I think. So we'll see where we go. But that's largely how we kind of identified the problem and then sought to address the problem, and then realized that when you address the problem, there's trade-offs. And when you're in a very, seasoned profession like the law or the, accounting profession or something like that, things have been done the way that they've been done for hundreds of years for a reason. And when you start to say, hey, we're just going to ignore all that stuff, you'll learn. But early on when we started the firm too, Aaron, I worked opposite of a lawyer who had been running his practice since just before the pandemic, and he basically said, "Hey, we realized if we could be successful during the Great Recession in 2007, so 15, 16, 17 years at this point." And he, I was telling him about our model, and he laughed and he goes, "Let me know when that changes." And I thought, you smug son of a bitch, who the fuck, But I know what he's saying now. I now understand what he was getting at. And we have no intentions of changing or conforming back to the norm, but certainly we understand that there are new problems that have to be tackled.
I know you've done over $1 billion in transaction volume at this point, right?
Yes. So I'll tell you what we've done, who we are, and then what we're trying to become and why we're trying to become it. So we started 3 years ago, 2022. Myself, Kevin Henderson, Sam Rosati, who I mentioned, launched the firm. And we did it not because we intended to launch a law firm. In fact, I went back to one of my mentors in Big Law, and he said, candidly, like, Eric, you're the last person I would have thought would start his own law firm. We did it because we started networking in the SMB, ETA, small business, Main Street space, wanting to be investors, wanting to get involved, similar to how you are, and had a ton of people come to us, go, hey, I need a good lawyer for a 2, 4, 6, 8, $10 million transaction. Who do you have? And I didn't even know. I was working at Kirkland and Ellis, was billing $1,500 an hour. And I'm like, let me go find you somebody. I can't do it at $1,500 an hour, obviously, so let me find you somebody who can. And then realize you pretty quickly that you either find mid-market M&A attorneys who don't really want the work, or too expensive, don't understand SBA, don't understand negotiating opposite of a mom and pop, or you find really crappy Main Street lawyers who do everything and are not well suited for these transactions. So I was referring this work out to people who either didn't want it, weren't doing a good job, weren't being responsive, or to people who weren't capable of doing it. So we pretty quickly went, well, shit, I've got an inbox with hundreds of thousands of dollars potential legal fees, nobody who wants to service it. And I love these clients. Like, I'm in this space because I love the people, number one. The work is fascinating. What they're trying to do is fascinating. And it's really important. So I got, people that I really care about and like and have gotten to know, trying to do things that I think are interesting, and no one will help them, and I have the skill set to help them. So let's see if we can make it work. And we didn't know, right? We were getting ready to launch, and I was in the shower, and I was, working for, one of the top 3 law firms in the world, and thinking, I'm literally launching a law firm off of basically a Twitter account. This is either going to be the stupidest thing someone has ever done before, or, whatever. And it's been somewhere in between. But so we launched the firm. We had, immediate success. When you have that, when you give people what they want, instead of pushing the boulder uphill, you're pushing it down, right? And so now, instead of pushing the boulder, we're guiding it. We're getting overrun by clients on day number 1 to try to engage us to do these transactions. I talked about a ton of them. And so that was a problem. That's a problem, right? You have problems in business. Having too much demand and not enough supply is a problem, because you're either turning people away and they're frustrated, or you're doing a poor job and they're frustrated. Either way, there are going to be people who are frustrated with you in that environment. So you quickly have to figure out how you scale up. So we built pretty quickly in 2 years, I guess in 10 months now, we've built a pretty sizable firm. We've got about a 20 to 25 person total headcount. We've got somewhere between 10 and 15 lawyers. We've added a few more recently. Really fantastic people. If you go look up their backgrounds, these are tremendous people that could go anywhere, work anywhere, and are really and want to come join a kind of a startup law firm. So it's been a fascinating thing. So I think we've built a really good brand, and I think we've done really good work. And we've got a really impressive roster of clients that have closed down businesses and that by and large are succeeding. There's a lot of pushback on entrepreneurship through acquisition and whether it's a good idea, taking SBA 7(a) debt, as many people happen to do, which we don't only do that. I'll talk about that in a second, but is that a good idea? And by and large, what we have seen in what I call blue chip ETA. Blue chip ETA is when you buy a good business at a higher purchase price. These aren't $400,000 laundromats. They're $5 to $10 million businesses with a layer of management, great brands, in industries that are niches that have some sort of moat. They've done quality earnings, have hired a good M&A attorney. They have transferable skills. They're elite backgrounds, kids and people out of great schools and, corporate veterans. They're doing well, right? So we've seen a lot of that. We closed well over $1 billion in transactions since 2022. We did about $950 million in our first full calendar year of deals. Wow. But with that comes then the next problem, which is now they're all coming back to me going, hey, Eric, I need an employee incentive plan, or I need help with tax, or I'm buying a new business. We've got an employment matter. We've got general corporate. We want to form an entity. We want to do everything under the sun. And so pretty quickly we realized, okay, we need to become a general full service law firm pretty fast. And then it comes down to adding the right people. We're not just going to scale. We need to add high quality people to the team. So we're doing that pretty quickly. But our vision is we think that there is a realistic pathway to becoming, call it the Kirkland and Ellis of Main Street, or the Live Oak Bank of legal, a true national small business law firm that is built by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. We're very entrepreneurial, all of us. Everybody on our team is kind of a risk taker, business type person. We have peer business people on our team like Sam Rosati who know capital raising and running up businesses and exiting. So we wanted to marry up, and I think we've done a good job of marrying up really high quality experience, top of their field lawyers with really experienced business people as well. And I think that there's a need for that nationally. And so thus far we're licensed in, I couldn't even give you the number, but all the major states: New York, Florida, Texas, California, Colorado, Michigan, Minnesota, North Carolina, just added Massachusetts, and a few others that I'm forgetting. So all of the really Georgia, all the really popular states where entrepreneurs want to buy businesses or running businesses, we now have a presence, and we've got people all over, and we're rapidly adding. So if there's anybody listening who's a lawyer or in the legal profession that wants a different type of profession where there's some soul to it, you're not commuting, we're completely remote too, right? So what we do both for our lawyers and for our clients is we remove all that overhead nonsense. I'm sitting in my house right now in Windermere, Florida, in my office. I don't have a fancy office with artwork and all that, and the secretary sitting outside the door. All that does is just ratchet up the need for law firms to charge high billable rates. And so we've alleviated all that. And it's great for our clients, and our lawyers love it, right? My ethos is, Aaron, I don't care if you're as long as what you're doing is ethically compliant, you're delivering great high quality work for our clients, and you're hitting deadlines. I don't care if you're in the Caribbean, man. I don't care if you're in upstate New York. I don't care where you are, right? Go live where you want to live. Right. It's been great. And that's what I wanted, right? So flashback to where I was. You said, how did you get into all this? Well, I literally, through kind of just dumb luck, have built the job that I wanted, the control over my life. We still work a ton, right? I got a buddy who his kid's in the same class as mine. He works a 9 to 5. He has to be there at 8 and he has to be there until 5, right? And so I probably work legitimately, Aaron, twice as many hours as this guy in a week. Great guy, by the way. This is not an attack on him. This is, he's a good person. But I probably work twice as many hours as this guy does. But I'm at everything at my kid's school. I'm at all the field trips. I'm at all the school parties. I mean, they had a field trip yesterday. I couldn't even come because I've exceeded the number of field trips that I'm allowed to attend in a calendar year. I'm done. I'm tapped out, right? Parent teacher conference. I'm at everything. And this guy he's at nothing, right? Because he wants to be there, but he can't. He's got to be, can't do school. I do all the school drop-offs. I do all the school pickups. He can't do any of those things. And so, that's what I wanted, right? I wanted the fulfilling career with the control, with the great clients, and I had to build it.
That's awesome. You and I, I didn't know how much we shared in common. Obviously, this is our first longer, real conversation, but I made like in 10 months in 2022, over $600,000.
Wow.
And I was getting paid really well to do a job that I was very good at. And I wasn't working, I mean, I had to be on the phone and stuff like that, but it was relatively, it wasn't challenging. You know what I mean? Like I was just like, and I had this crazy idea of like, okay, well, if I leave this and go do something on my own, I'll have ownership over it, but I'll also be building something for me versus building something for someone else. And, but I mean, golden handcuffs, like you and I both, sounds like both had some serious golden handcuffs. And then we both had to go from like an employee mindset, and it was 2022 for me too. Like I left that job in October of 2022, and then I acquired the brand for Rolling Suds in like early January of 23, and then we launched in February. So very similar backgrounds.
What were you doing in 2022? What job?
So I was working at a franchisor that owned multiple different brands, and we grew that company from when I first was involved, it was 2 brands, and then when I left, we had 12.
Wow.
And
that's awesome.
One of the brands that I worked on, they bought it, and it was essentially a turnaround. So it was like a 98 unit franchise system that did drywall repair. And the founder exited, and it was kind of a mess. Like there were no systems in place. Franchisees were upset. We had to fully rebrand, do a whole, I always tell people, like, we didn't build from scratch. We built from negative scratch because we had to reverse a lot of the stuff that happened. But then we launched our first franchisee with that brand. He was profitable in his first month. And then I took that brand from 98 units to 323 units in 2 years. And they pay you really well when you do that, turns out. But I just wasn't in control of what happens to franchisees after they sign. And that drove me absolutely crazy. And I had seen a lot of stuff in the franchise industry that drove me crazy. And so I was like, I want to do it on my own. And I think that there's a need to do this in a way that I think hasn't been done before. So anyways, our stories overlap a lot more than I knew before talking to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it is a transition, right? You go from having, being within a business and, I was off last week, as you know, because I was moving, and I come back. You can't just check out mentally until Monday morning. I used to do that in corporate. I'd be on vacation. The world could be burning down. Didn't matter, right? When you're building a business and running it, and it's yours, and the clients are yours, and the franchisees are yours, you're not just checking out on them until Monday morning, right? It's all consuming, and it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. Right. I mean, I'm a lot grayer now, and maybe that would have happened anyways. But 3 years later, I'm almost completely
I'm
gray.
a lot balder. It's like it just happens.
We're showing some signs here. We're getting there's some indications, Aaron. But you have to have a different mentality. But it can be great, right? I mean, you have that control, right? And we've had some people recently that we didn't want to work with or for a variety of what I think are good reasons, and we're not working with or for those people, and in my prior life I wouldn't have had that control, right? They would have told me to show up and deal with whoever I have to deal with and do it with a Chick-fil-A smile on my face, and I would have had to do it, and I don't have to do it anymore. And so there is positive with that as well.
And I think what you do and what I do a little bit overlap. You work with our mutual connection, Adam Wash, who's actually doing our trademark stuff. How does what you do and franchising kind of intersect? Like, what are some of the things you've done on that in that world?
Yeah. In the franchising world, I mean, we do a lot of franchise work, and we do have clients who acquire a lot of franchises. Franchise M&A is very popular, and I really like the franchise space. Biggest reason I like the franchise space is that the big players, private equity and the like, are a little bit afraid of, or they don't have the appreciation for the franchise space because the restrictions and the royalties and the like. And so the competition level is much lower. And we have a lot of clients who've had tremendous success in franchise where, they buy one and then all of a sudden they've got 12 of them and then they're buying the franchisor, right? Largely because there just isn't anybody else who wants in. That has deep pockets. And so there's a lot of opportunity there. We do, like I said, we do general corporate stuff, and part of that is kind of franchise development and the like. So there is some of that in our practice, in our firm now. But we've been doing a ton of franchise M&A. So you go and you buy a franchise or a franchisee, and it's a standard M&A deal. By and large, it's a standard M&A deal. You're buying a business. That business just happens to be subject to a franchise agreement, an FTD. You've got to review that stuff. You got to make sure that you work with the franchisor to get the approvals that they need. And then there is an additional layer of business diligence to be done because you need to understand that franchise, and not all franchises are created equally. Some of them are great and well run, and some of them, as you mentioned a minute ago, are dumpster fires, and some of them have litigation. Some of them have a bunch of franchisees that are disgruntled and are actively trying to collaborate to sue the franchisor. And you need to know that if you're going to buy one of those, because surely if they're all disgruntled, they'd love to sell. They'd love to sell to you, and they certainly aren't going to tell you that they're doing it because they're angry. And so you've got to do that level of business diligence when you're acquiring a franchise. But otherwise it's a pretty standard business transaction. But we do a lot of that, a lot of it.
That's cool.
Yeah.
What are some of the things? Like, what are some trends maybe that you've seen in the ETA space? A lot of the people who might be listening to this are thinking about buying a business. It could be a franchise, or it could be an existing business, or like, hey, I'll just start a side hustle and try to figure it out. Like, but what are some things that you've seen? Because I feel like you're closest to that space, probably closer than almost anyone I've probably interviewed on here. So I'm curious as to what you've seen. Maybe trends or evolutions of the world, the ETA world.
Yeah, the big trends are, number one is the type of person buying a business, right? So buying and selling businesses is not a new phenomenon. People have been buying and selling businesses forever. What is new is the person who's buying these businesses. Historically, you'd be buying a tree trimming business, you're probably selling to the guy who has run the business long term, or a very small subset of very entrepreneurial people, or you're selling to private equity if it's a larger business. But now you've got this entire class, this entire generation of entrepreneurship through acquisition buyers that are coming out of elite schools or long corporate careers or military or what have you, that typically would go and do kind of Wall Street, typical corporate stuff, that are now saying, hey, forget that. I'm going to go buy, this business in the middle of nowhere. There's a book that was written on it called the Harvard Business Review Guide to Buying a Small Business, a little red book. It's very popular. And then a second book called Buy Then Build by Walker Dybel. And it started kind of a little bit of a cottage industry of people getting excited about this concept. And it's really exploded in recent years. And the numbers really sound really sexy. It's an easy thing to sell. Now, it's easy in execution. It's very difficult in reality, not because buying a business is any harder than starting a business, but it's entrepreneurship, right? You're running a business, and that's what we talked about a minute ago is a challenging thing. But when you buy a small business, the loose valuations, you're going to pay somewhere between it depends on the business. It could be lower, but usually 2 to 4.5 times earnings is the threshold that you're going to fall in. That earnings can be defined as seller's discretionary earnings for smaller businesses or EBITDA for a larger business. But effectively what it means is if a business is cash flowing or profiting $1 million a year, round numbers, and most of these businesses are in the 500,000 earning to 1.5 million earning range in kind of the ETA movement. North of that, you're probably going to sell to private equity. But to give you a round numbers example, if a business is doing $1 million in earnings, that business is probably going to sell for 2.5 to 4 million bucks. Which, normally you'd go, well, Aaron, where the hell am I going to come up with 2.5 to 4 million bucks, right? The answer is SBA 7(a) debt, right? So you can go get financing from the SBA or from a bank who has access to the SBA products and put down somewhere between 5 and 10% of that down payment. So if it's $1 million earning business, and let's say you buy it for 2.5 million bucks on the lower end, because it's a lower quality business with less of the kind of the desirable characteristics, or in a more challenging industry like construction or something like that. But just for round numbers, $1 million earning business, you're buying it for 2.5 million bucks. You're going to need to put down $250,000 under the typical SBA 7(a) 10% down. You can reduce that to 5% with a seller standby note, so now you're down to $125,000 down. And then you can utilize outside investors for some portion of that. Most banks are going to say, Aaron, I want you in for 1 to 3% at least. You got to put something in. In some instances, you can get away with kind of zero down if you have investors. But you'll have the investors come in and take that down payment, and all of a sudden you own a business that is cash flowing $1 million a year. You've paid 2.5 million bucks for it. We'll do the fast math on that, right? Not a tough thing to pay back if the business is truly cash flowing $1 million a year. You take $150,000 salary, you got pretty healthy, amount to allocate to debt service, and then you've got that debt repaid. Now, a lot of these people are coming out of school. They're 27 years old. They've just graduated from Wharton or from Chicago or from some MBA program. And they're going, do I want to go to Wall Street and make $200,000 a year fetching coffee and getting yelled at and working till 3 a.m.? Or do I want to go buy, a commercial cleaning business in Tampa, Florida, and, in 5 to 7 to 9 years, if things work out, I have a debt-free asset that's cash flowing $1 million a year. That's a really powerful proposition, right? Now,
yeah, totally.
It's not that easy in reality, right? Obviously, there is a million things that we could say about what happens after you buy that business. A million things that can go wrong in the transaction process. But loosely, that's the proposition. So very sexy. So that's the biggest trend. So young people across the country, 25 to 45-year-old people who historically would have gone to Wall Street are now doing that instead. Number two is the marketplace is evolving really quickly. When we started the firm in 2022, interest rates were half of what they are today, right? SBA 7(a) debt is mostly floating rate debt that is tied to the going interest rate. So when we started the firm, people were buying at like 5.5. Now they're buying at like 10, 11%, which valuations have not come down the same way as they will be or are in some instances in real estate, just because there's so many buyers and so few high quality businesses. So sellers are still able to command that same price, but you cannot finance it the same way. So they're bringing in a lot more investors. So you have this investor class of person who's now come along that wants to invest in these businesses. And then there's been some rapid evolution of the SBA requirements, the SBA threshold. Previously, you had to do a 100% buyout of the business. Now you can do a seller rollover. So we're seeing a lot more sellers that are staying on, taking a small piece of the business like you see in mid-market M&A. And it's rapidly evolving. And even this morning, there's breaking news, and we still are, as a firm, are digesting what the SBA just announced this morning about changes due to the kind of the DOGE evaluation of the SBA and their fees. So now they're reinstituting fees. So there's a lot of things that are rapidly happening kind of in small business M&A. Or
That's really interesting.
lower middle market M&A.
That's really interesting. So someone coming out of college, out at MBA, what's some things that you can, what's some things you can tell them to either position themselves better for buying a business, finding the right business? Clint, and the reason I ask is Clint, I haven't met Clint, but Clint Fiore, who I follow online, he wrote this post about kind of like the silver tsunami, but like really there's a lot of businesses out there that aren't underwritable because it's the guy's 60 years old. He puts his boat and his cars and his motorhome through the business, and like it's never going to be worth what he knows it's worth because you can't underwrite it. Bank can't underwrite it. So I thought that post was really compelling because at least in my search, when I was searching for a brand of franchise, that I saw that a lot. Like, hey, my business is worth $5 million. It's like, it's not. You're on your taxes. It says that you cash flow 300 grand. So like from an underwriting perspective, it's not worth $5 million, even if you've got an additional 600,000 that's in the mattress somewhere. Right. So can you speak to that? And then maybe from the perspective of like helping a buyer understand the landscape a little bit better?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the pushback on this concept of like the silver tsunami or the great wealth transfer. And I'll tell you, it's real, right? So the great wealth transfer is it's an economic phenomenon that's happening in our country where the baby boomers are the wealthiest generation in American history, the world's history. And they're dying, right? They're going to die. They're not immortal. And that wealth has to go somewhere. Now, that wealth is going to get transferred to a number of places, but the wealth is comprised of a bunch of stuff. Obviously, it's typical stuff, real estate and, savings and stocks and bonds, but a large portion of it also is businesses, and particularly American small businesses, like sub $50 million revenue businesses. And most of those people, if you've run a successful business, Aaron, for a few decades in a gritty or niche blue collar or whatever Main Street industry, HVAC, roofing, plumbing, commercial cleaning, like your kids they probably went to a great school, right? You at least live in a great community. They went to a great public school, but they probably went to a private school, right? They're off at university. They're studying to be doctors and accountants and lawyers. And also they watched dad grind for decades in this really tough business because, again, entrepreneurship's not easy. And they're going, dude, I don't want anything to do with that, right? I don't want to run dad's stained glass restoration business, right? So dad reaches retirement age and he's got to sell that business. He has no choice. He could shut it down. He could just close the doors. But he's not going to do that because there's value there, right? So he goes out to the marketplace and sells to the people that we just talked about shortly ago with that kind of 2.5 to 4.5 times multiple. Now, what you're suggesting is the pushback that we typically hear, which is, well, most of those businesses are not saleable, Eric. Well, yeah, they're not, right? A lot of those businesses are just glorified personal goodwill. You're a one-man band. You haven't built any systems. There's no enterprise value. It's your personal Rolodex. The moment you sell that business, there's really nothing for someone to buy, right? But that doesn't mean that business isn't valuable. It doesn't have market share, right? So if I'm running let's think of something that has no enterprise value, like even a local HVAC business where I'm an HVAC tech, and all I do is I do the work myself and I run a nice little business. I got a great reputation. Well, guess what? As soon as you're gone, now everybody's got to find that's been calling you is to find somebody else to call. So that's an opportunity for young people, and that's happening in huge numbers, right? But what you suggested is the seller's running a lot of personal expenses through the business and is driving that taxable earning into the ground, so there's nothing to underwrite. Well, there's still value there. If you can see
Right.
if you can find a business that, has, I've got one right now, and I'll change the facts to anonymize it, but, the business is selling, let's say it's selling for 2.8. It does, 1.5 in earnings, but he's been, playing fast and loose with his tax returns for a long time. So a bank won't underwrite it. Well, guess what? We're going to do seller financing. He's going to finance it himself because there is, the buyer does want to buy it. It is a valuable opportunity. It just isn't going to underwrite through a bank. And guess what? That's better for the buyer. That is a better opportunity.
Right.
I think some of my smartest buyers are the ones that are going out and they're finding these businesses that have issues. All kinds of issues. Customer concentration. If you have one big customer in the business and you're going to sell that business, people are naturally going to get a little queasy. They're going to go, well, there's so much risk in that one client. Banks aren't going to underwrite it. Well, you still want to sell the business because, again, there's still value there. Just because it's one client
Sure.
and it's got
Yeah.
some issues doesn't mean it's not a valuable opportunity. You're doing seller financing and you're finding a structure that mitigates the risk associated with that customer concentration. No matter what the risk is, there is a legal structure and mechanism to mitigate that risk. We can use an earnout structure. We can use seller financing. We can say, hey, I'm going to pay you. I had a client buy a really interesting niche hospitality services business. They deliver, a specific product to a large hospitality business. Well, again, it's a one-man band. The guy was kind of, creating the product himself in the facility and delivering it to the big hospitality. He's been doing that for years and years. Well, my guy comes along and goes, hey, this is a business. Like, this is a good business. It's got really no enterprise value, but I can give it enterprise value. But also I'm worried, right? Because this guy's been making these flowers. This guy's been making the flowers for years and delivering it to this big hospitality business. Well, what if I can't make the flowers right, or they decide because again, it's being sold to one big vendor. What if that one big vendor goes away, or what if there's a personal relationship that I don't know about with that vendor? So he is paying him $100,000 per year based on earnings thresholds. Up to five. It's a pretty small business, so up to $500,000. So he's gonna, for 5 years, he's gonna write him a check for $100,000 at the end of the year, depending on how much money the business did or did not make. If the business doesn't make any money, the seller doesn't get paid anything. That does a couple of cool things, right? One is it aligns incentives with the seller. Now all of a sudden the seller is not inclined to just jump on a catamaran and get out of town, because if that business doesn't make any money, he's not getting paid out. So if you need to get him on the phone to make a phone call to that vendor or smooth something over, going to do it, right? Sellers don't love that arrangement. Obviously they go, well, Aaron, what if you screw it up? What if it's not the flower business? What if you just are a jerk, or you don't know how to run it, and so it doesn't make any money because you don't know what you're doing? Well, that's when you get to tie them back into the business and say, well, great, well, stick around and help me transition this, make sure I don't screw it up. But also, guess what, dude? If I don't buy it, nobody else probably is, right? So right. You see those businesses with warts on it. If you're just trying to, because you have been in and around business now, Aaron, long enough to know that there is no perfect business. There is no perfect business, particularly in lower middle market, Main Street, premium age, whatever it is. These businesses have problems. And so you're going to have to figure out which problems you're willing to live with and how you're going to mitigate those problems. But if you're simply going, hey, I can't buy these small businesses because, it's all owner dependent, or there's customer concentration, or the industry has headwinds, or whatever, you're never going to transact. You're just not.
Yeah. So I saw that when I was searching. I joke, I was a searcher before I knew what a searcher was. Mm-hmm. I was like, okay, I'm going to find a great business that's got a good brand and a good reputation. And then I'm going to create another business, which is the franchise business. And I'm going to give the founder upside in this new business. And the founder gets to keep 100% of their business. But this new business is going to acquire the systems, processes, trademarks, everything that has been or will be created by this business, and acquire the franchise rights. And instead of buying that business, I'm going to raise capital and invest my capital in the franchisor, because the franchisor needs a ton of capital to grow the right way. And with Rolling Suds, I got to that business, and it was very similar to the kind of the businesses we're talking about. The founder of Rolling Suds is the commercial salesperson. He's a great guy. It's a family business. Brian, his son, was basically doing like 4 people's roles, and like grew the business really well. But I knew that despite all of that, it was a replicable business model that could go anywhere in the country. And so I did something I call franchise through acquisition, FTA, which is a little bit different in kind of, that's the very high level deal structure. But I mean, I was very similar to some of the buyers you're talking about. I'm like, this is a great business. Yes, it's got some hair on it, but like ultimately the actual systems in the business are replicable, and I can replicate and teach franchise owners this business.
That's awesome. Aaron, let me pause for one second. I had somebody right here that needs something from me.
Go for it. like, you're acquiring customers and clients predominantly from Twitter and social media, right? Like that's where your I mean, other than referrals.
No.
Where do your clients come from?
I have the data right here. Let me see if I can, because I don't want to exaggerate. We've got ethical requirements around not fibbing. So let me actually pull the data up, because what's interesting is the network was originally built via social media, right? So the origins of it are definitely social media, the vast majority of it. Certainly there's some stuff from our big law backgrounds, and Kevin, Sam, and I had networks prior to social media. But the network that we built from social media has largely gone offline, right? A lot of the people that were on social media early on have moved on. It's seasons, right? People get tired of things, they move on. But we've made relationships with service providers and SBA lenders and other people through that have now sent us clients. And then those clients then close, have a good experience, and then they send us more clients, right? So over time, our largest category of, our two largest categories of clients, and there are some bits of this data that need to be perfected. So I'm going to stay away from giving you specific dollar amounts. But we have under 3 years, 723 matters according to this. Again, I don't think this is perfect. The largest lead source is referrals, number one.
Okay.
So that's a great indication. It means people who have done work with us are now sending us more work, or they're telling people about us that are coming to us. That's number one. Number two, which is a close second, and I don't necessarily know the distinction between these two categories, so something worth investigating, but is pre-existing relationships. So number one is referrals. Number two is pre-existing relationships. So I suspect referrals means you did a deal with us and you refer us somebody else. Number two is pre-existing relationship, meaning you did a deal with us, you do another deal with us. Number three is Twitter. Number four is LinkedIn. Number five is Search Funder. Web search is growing. And that's all time. We're trying to skate where the puck is going, not where it is.
Right.
Which, I'll be honest with you, we don't know what that is, right? But one thing I do know is that everybody likes video. Everybody. Young people, old people, people yours and I's age. What are we, middle age? Like video. So at some point we have to start incorporating video in a better way. But you once you get something like this off the ground, then it becomes if you're doing it the right way, right? Because I love project-based business. I think recurring revenue is obviously great. If you can get recurring revenue, you should probably pursue that in your business. But don't sleep on project-based revenue, right? Because project-based revenue gives you the opportunity to perfect your work, because you're doing a lot of it, and build what I think is similar to the recurring is a compounding funnel of clientele. But the trick is you've got to do good work, right? You do good work, people have good outcomes, people talk about those outcomes, and it creates that cycle, that compounding effect. And so that's something we've been really focused on, and we've watched it kind of play out in the numbers where the relationships go offline into real people who have worked with or for or with our firm as a service provider or as a client, and then they're telling more people, they're sharing that experience publicly. And we've got hundreds of, it's a little beneath a prestigious law firm to have Google reviews, but we have some pretty terrific, I think, body of Google reviews, 143 5-star Google reviews, which is pretty cool. That really tell a story that people are able to then lean into when they're trying to decide what lawyer to hire. So it started with social media, but now it's grown to much more than that.
I still think that this is the social media piece and being in this creator economy. I mean, it's something that you've tapped into that I haven't seen many other attorneys tap into. When did you, was that by accident? Or was it intentional, or was it by accident? Then it was intentional, because you grew you grew what, like 60,000 followers in a year or something like that on Twitter? Something crazy like that?
Something
was
like
it 2
that.
years?
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
I've been on since
That's
August of
wild.
2021 now, so it'll be 4 years in August. But we have really restrictive ethics in the law. Can't market, can't solicit. So, if I'm going to say call me to
I didn't
do
know
your,
that.
Yeah, if I'm going to say call me to do your M&A work, I've got to file that with the state bar, pay a big fee, wait 20 days. So you'll see some other folks that have come into the space, have followed us in, that don't know those ethics, and we watch them make this mistake. And of course, we just let them. We're not gonna be a Karen, but they'll be like, call me to do, call so and so to do your tax work, and you're like, dude, that's a pretty clear ethics violation, right? You can't do that. The billboards that you see, they take those billboards, they file them with the state bar, they wait the 20 days, they pay the fee, they have to meet the requirements, and then they can post it. But it works great for a billboard, doesn't work great for a tweet, right? So all of it had to focus on educating and informing and not soliciting. I can't see somebody that goes, hey, I'm thinking about buying a business, and I shoot him a DM and go, hey, Aaron, hire me for do that business. Like, can't do that. You'll see some folks do that as well. That's not permissible. So did it with one arm tied behind my back, right? And what was the question again? Sorry.
Yeah. So, you've tapped into this kind of like creator economy element, and you really largely built your business on it. So was it intentional? You started doing it in 2021. So that was when you were working at Big Law. So was it intentional, or then was it by accident, and then did it become intentional? Like, I just want to double click on like this creator element of your business.
No, it was complete accident. The one thing that I think is unique about people are like, oh, you're a content creator, you're an influencer. I have a lot less people that hate me for my content than most people at my size. I think. You tell me. You're out there in the field, but
I would agree. Yeah.
I don't have a ton of people that like hate me because they're like, you're just trying to. Because I haven't been from the start. I mean this sincerely. I started trying to network in ETA. This is how the whole firm started. And back to the story I told earlier. I was trying to network in ETA so that I could make investments, get to know people. I was watching during the pandemic. I felt like I had a connection with certain individuals I thought were great. Wanted to get to know them. Reg Zellers and different people like that were active on social. And I thought, let's make an account and get to know these people. And like it worked. Like all of a sudden these people were like my friends and they're my clients and stuff. It was never an intention to start a firm. And so over time, I've gotten some pushback actually on my content. Like I've had people all the time. People will not hesitate to tell you what they think about your content, Aaron. Like they don't hesitate. They'll be like, you should be more blah, blah, blah. You should talk less about your kids and less about your family and less about pizza and more about, technical, legal, da, da, da. And I'm like, dude, like, listen, it is so hard to consistently make content. And right now I'm in a kind of I go through seasons, I go through seasons where I'm very active and seasons where I'm down. Right now I'm down, right? Because some days you just don't feel like, I'm not sitting down and going, hey, let me create a, tweet series and put it in Hype Theory and just pepper the shit out of everybody. Like you see from some other folks that clearly have, an agenda to do, X, Y, and Z with it. And no judgment on my part of those people. Like that's why they're here and why they're doing it, and it works and great. And many of them have very successful, like the Sahil Blooms that ultra successfully. His content, no disrespect to him, but like, regurgitating like Wikipedia pages about like unique concepts. And like, yes, he's putting his own spin on it to get the type of traction he got, but like, then it kind of evolved into like, okay, now I'm writing a book and now all I do is talk about the book, right? Right. That's very agenda based, and that's great for him and it's working, so like you can talk badly about him as much as you want to. There's a lot of kind of social media influencers in our space that people all the time will be like, oh, this person's such a, we have to call this person out because, well, dude, those people are making so much money selling the educational materials that they're selling. They don't care what you think, and you're not going to stop. You're not going to stop them, right? You can make your whole shtick about how you're, going to talk badly about these people because they're charlatans and whatever. Not going to have an impact on them. or their earnings potential going to have a tremendous impact on you as a person, because that is an incredibly negative way to be conducting yourself all the time, constantly be calling people out publicly. So that's always been my philosophy, is like, I'm going to tweet what I want to tweet because I want to tweet it, and anything else in my content. Now, I don't want to say things that are embarrassing. I have a team now that's counting on me to not, be embarrassing, but people want authenticity. They want you to be yourself and be real. And so, somebody asked me once, like, what my objective, like, what are you trying to accomplish with like all this? And I'm like, man, I'm trying to enjoy my life, right? Like, I'm trying to have fun on a daily basis, do good work, enjoy my life. I'm going to be dead soon. I don't know. Could be next year, could be 30 years. It's coming. Like, it's coming. It's coming. So hopefully I'll have some fun while I'm here. The whole thing was just kind of a happy accident. The fact that a firm was born out of it is really fun. And I think one thing that a lot of people should know about creating content, so to speak, is you get to know yourself tremendously well when you put your thoughts out there on the internet. You got people that tell you it's stupid. They got people that tell you that they love it. You got people that will tell you that they're big fans of yours, and people that will tell you that they're going to come to your house and kill you. You know what I mean? Like, there's a wide spectrum of things that happen. But what does happen is you get to know yourself really well. You get to know the ideas that you had that are actually stupid and not well thought out, and the ideas that you had that, like, oh shit, like, people actually like this. This is resonating with people. Like, yeah, okay, all right, okay, and over time, that, if done the right way, and if you're actually using it as a feedback loop, is a tremendously positive thing for a person to be 40 years old and to have self-awareness of your strengths, your weaknesses, your good ideas, your bad ideas. Do people like me? Do people dislike me? What group of people like me? What group of people do not like me? There are very distinct groups of people culturally that really like my content, that really identify with, that like are the kind of guys and gals I should go get pizza and beer with, and groups of people that like probably best that we just don't get to know each other, and when you're building a business that way, it's fantastic too, because when I get on a console, and we've grown so much now that this has evolved. Early on, I'd get on a consult and I'd get 80 to 90% of those transactions if they went forward, because the people would already know me, right? They're not getting on the call with me if they don't know me and they don't, like me and they don't want to hire me. That's changed over time now because we've grown so much. So now we get people on the call. I had somebody the other day who actually hired me, and he was like, "What is your name?" He didn't know me. He didn't know me at all, and that's a normal experience. Ended up hiring me, still hired me, but, that's a really healthy thing, and more people would benefit by setting their insecurity aside and putting themselves out there publicly, if you want to. I guess it's not for everybody. Also, it's definitely got its downsides.
Yeah, I mean, for me, so I didn't really, when I launched Rolling Suds, I had absolutely no idea that it would be as big of a part of our business as it is today. Mm-hmm. In 2023, so we launched in 2023, we started to get traction from other people in the franchise space, like Brian Beers and the Wolf of Franchises, and posting about what we were doing. And we started to get franchisee, like a lot of our franchisees came from Twitter. And my thought was always like, I don't know why people have this thought of like a content creator is like a bad thing. But I was like, oh, I'm just going to be like looking at the camera and like pretending that I'm interesting. And like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be like acting. And so I didn't do it. And then in December of 23, I was like, wait, there's something to this. And I had like 200 followers on Twitter. And I was like, I'm just going to start writing stuff. And I did. And it's attracted a large portion of our franchise owners. And I agree with you. When I sit down and I write, and you have to try to conceptualize your thoughts about what are the things that you think about and why do you think that way, and then you have to write about it in a way that a sixth grader could understand.
Yeah. I know. I had somebody call me out on that.
You have to hope that people engage with it and are interested in it.
Yeah. People all the time will be like, "Oh, this post is clearly engagement bait." I'm like, do you write things that you hope no one is going to read? right? Are you going to spend the time to write something that that you feel like when you publish, no one's going to read this. It's not interesting, right? So where's the line that it becomes engagement bait? I think the line is like if you're trying to be salacious or trying to incorporate some theme that isn't, sincere so that you could just spark outrage or whatever. But oftentimes I'll post something and people will be like, oh, nice engagement bait, Eric. And I'm like, guys, I did publish this because I thought you would, I hoped and thought in my mind, based on my experiences and my value set, that you would find it interesting and that you would hopefully engage with it. So if that's engagement bait, okay. But I'm not going to write things that I don't think people are going to engage with, right?
Right.
And so you see that all the time where people take exception with like your content, and it's like you can just keep scrolling. You don't have to stop and get all emotionally invested in it.
Well, it's so funny too because people do get emotionally invested in, and when you build something like what you're building or what I'm building, it like makes some people upset that like maybe want to build something like that, or they don't think you're building it the right way, or whatever preconceived idea that they have in their mind about it. Like last night, someone posted about me and was like, if your guru takes pictures like this, and it was me standing next to one of our first franchises. Did you see that?
Yeah. I gotta check a lot of it. I was like, what do we got? I was like, whose podcast am I going on tomorrow? What's going on here?
So I commented on it. I was like, I gotta say, Enron Harper's pretty good, and I got like 35 new followers or something overnight. I was like, I mean, I'll take it, but it pisses people off sometimes when you do things that they think that they maybe wanted to do, or whatever issue that they're battling internally. It's none of my business. Like that's the reason they're mad. It's not personal. I'm just doing something that you're just doing something that they wish they could do.
I go on a lot of these podcasts, and oftentimes people will be like, I can't believe you went on so-and-so's podcast. She's a charlatan, or he's a, scammer. And I'm like, guys, selling an info product doesn't make you a scammer, right? Like people are paying for the product. If they don't feel like they got value, or if it's like truly a misrepresentation, that's a scam, right? But I go on your podcast. Like I'm on this podcast, Aaron, to like, one, it's fun, but two is like, you're promoting my business. I'm not necessarily promoting yours. You know what I mean? And so people have a tendency to just get really wound around the axle around all this content stuff. There are a few people that people get really upset about in terms of their content. And I'll tell you, actually, and I'll say this publicly, we can include this one in. Alex Hormozi. They get really upset with Alex Hormozi. I will tell you, if you're running a service business and you're not listening to Alex Hormozi's content, the free stuff. Now, I'm not saying buy conferences or do any of the other stuff. I'm not promoting his products. But I will tell you that as somebody who is building a service business, his free content and his books, $100 million leads, $100 million offers, are phenomenal for building a value proposition in your marketing and in your sales. And they get so upset at this guy. And it's just like, you got to have something better to do than spend your time getting wound around the axle about these people who don't even know you exist and don't care.
Yeah. So I met Cody last year. We recorded some content together. Her team reached out because they were interested in what we're doing. She loves boring businesses. I'm a franchisor of boring businesses. Like there's a lot of overlap there. Mm-hmm. And actually now she's a franchisor of boring businesses as well because she invested in Resi Brands. She's such a nice person. She's so genuine. She does kind of accentuate in a way online, but I think it's interesting and it captures attention in a way that a lot of other people can't. I also met Alex last year. I've read his $100 million leads book probably 3 times at this point. And I've read $100 million offers twice. I completely agree with you. I think what it is with Hormozi is he did this like I have nothing to sell you thing for like a long time.
Yes.
And
yeah.
like, I think, you know what I mean? And then like now he's selling something.
Right.
And so people are like, what is he doing? Like, and it's like, but what he's selling, like I went to that event, like it was very valuable. I went back to another event. I'm going back to another event in September, and it helped me identify constraints in my business. And I completely agree. Like if you're not watching that stuff, like watch it. Like it's very helpful.
Yeah. And, you know, like I was just looking, Cody has 2.4 million Instagram followers.
Yeah.
2.5 million Instagram followers. You're not going to take her down, guys. Like, you're not going to stop that. It's obviously resonating with a huge audience of people. And so spending any time or energy on that is a total waste of time. Total waste of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot of content creators or people who become famous and stuff say, like, just don't even read the comments, which I think there's something to that. I'm nowhere near in terms of the size or recognition as Cody or even you with your following and stuff like that. But like, there's a lot of haters that just don't like, I don't know, franchising, or they don't like, you know, whatever the thing is. And it's like, it doesn't change the way I'm going to build my company or the way I'm going to conduct business. Like reading it doesn't. So it's like, is it even relevant or an important use of time to do that?
Well, yeah. I'm starting again, kind of relatively from scratch on LinkedIn. I think I have like 15,000 on LinkedIn or something. And
that's great.
Somebody yesterday was like, your writing style needs to change. It was like, you need to stop writing like, you know, Twitter style copy. You know, each sentence is a new paragraph type of thing. It's like really hard to read. And I was like, well, I appreciate where you're coming from. I took it sincerely. I'm like, he's not wrong. You know, in a perfect world, I'm a Duke-educated attorney. I would like to write in a way that makes me look like a Duke-educated attorney, right? No one will read it, Aaron. If I write like, you know, I'm a professor at Duke, no one's going to read it. So what's my objective? Is my objective to be a, you know, self-important, you know, highly educated person that has to conform to norms, or is my objective to share information that I think will be read? And so I responded to him and I was like, hey, like, I appreciate that. And in a perfect world, I wouldn't do this, you know, but again, if I'm going to spend the time to create something that I think will resonate with people or be interesting or hopefully help somebody, then I want them to actually read it. So, you know, it's frustrating, but he was like, you're wrong.
Yeah.
He doubled down. He was like, you're wrong.
About...
It's harder to read, Eric. And I was like, dude, I appreciate that. And I was like, I had 300 million impressions on, you know, social media last year, like over 1 billion since 2022. If that reverses,
I'll get back to you.
Then yes. But right now I'm just going to stay with what's working, you know? And I was not trying to be a jerk about it. Like I really wasn't. I ran through ChatGPT. I was like, please write this in a way that does not make me sound like a jerk, because I'm not trying to be one. But like, I live in the world that I live, man. We live in the world of TikTok. We live in the world of splashy videos where it's got to have a hook. It's got to add value. It's got to have a payoff. It's got to keep the person. If there's even a blank space for a second, they'll scroll on you, you know? That is the world that we live in. So if we want to get our message out there in this very noisy world, we have to do it in a very directed way, or it's going to just be dead on arrival.
Hormozi actually talks about this. He says like a pretty large percentage of the population doesn't have, I don't know what the exact percentage is, but doesn't have higher than a 6th grade reading level. And so he puts everything that he writes into the Hemingway app and writes it until it's at like a 3rd grade or below reading level, other than what he puts on Twitter, I think. Because Twitter is literally just him thinking his thoughts, and that's like, but like everything else, like his books, everything is put into the Hemingway app.
Interesting.
Just so that more people acknowledge it. And so I've been starting to do that.
That's fascinating. I'm actually going to take one of his tweets right now. I'm going to put it into ChatGPT and ask it the reading level. What is
the Hemingway app is free too. You can just pop it in and automatically tells you the reading level.
Yeah.
Well,
So his tweet is, the fastest way to stack cash isn't chasing hacks. It's doing boring shit no one else sticks with. Consistency is the tax you pay to outlast talent. It says this passage is written at approximately 6th to 8th grade reading level, but stylistically it's crafted for a social media savvy adult audience. Punchy, motivational, and informal. That's actually like a great prompt. You want to write a good tweet that your audience is going to. Let's test this out right now in real time. Give me a good business tweet. Give me something. Give me something.
You put me on the spot. Let's say, I don't know, something about delegation. You're not gonna build a business that has any value unless you learn how to delegate.
Build a business that has any value unless you delegate. This is interesting. All right, so here's the prompt. I literally took how they characterized the Hormozi tweet, and I put, which is rewrite the following at approximately a 6th to 8th grade reading level, but stylistically crafted for a social media adult audience, punchy, motivational, and informal. I wrote, you are not going to build a business that has any value unless you learn to delegate. Let's see what it writes. I'm gonna post it. We're gonna post this, and we're gonna see what type.
Let's do it. Engagement it gets.
Oh, see, actually, it's not even. So I just rewrote it. It said, you'll never build a business that's worth anything if you don't learn to delegate.
It just wrote the same thing?
Pretty much. So it softened the language. So remove the word value and change it to worth anything. So let's make it a bit more complete of a thought.
Descriptive?
Yeah, descriptive. See what we come up with here. If you're doing everything yourself, you're not building a business. You're just building a job. The only way to grow something that's actually worth money is to delegate and trust others to carry the weight.
There you go.
Let's tweet it. Let's tweet it and see what happens.
Let's tweet it. Just
for fun. I suspect that people. I don't do enough of this. I'll use the ChatGPT voice feature to record longer form tweets, but I tell it to keep it casual and authentic, keep it in my tone. I'm like, I just want you to rewrite it so it's, clean. And, but I suspect that people are really leaning heavily into AI for all of their content generation.
Yeah. And you can tell, I think, when people do that, especially on comments that people do on LinkedIn.
Comments. And
it's now happening a lot more on Twitter. Like, you can tell that it's not a human, which is kind of a bummer because like that's the engagement piece of social media that's so valuable. But
there are a couple people in particular that lean way too heavily into the AI comments.
Yeah. And you can really tell, and it's like, I get it, they're trying to get engagement or whatever, but like you can tell that it's not them or whatever. But all right, well, before we wrap up here, because this has been an awesome conversation, I want to leave we've a lot of good nuggets for the listeners about buying businesses, doing diligence, learning about how entrepreneurship is different than being an employee.
Four likes already
common.
here, and we're cooking over here. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Keep
here we go.
We're cooking.
Here we go. 4 likes. That's a good rate of return on a tweet.
5
That's like
likes.
4 likes and
30. If this one goes viral, it'll be hilarious. I doubt.
I'll retweet. I'll quote tweet it.
Yeah, it does not have viral propensity here, but
that one about, what was it that you wrote about that was like, what was it, like buying land in some place? Yes.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yes.
That was a good one.
And
that was cool. I was laying on my couch. This is how I create content. This is my style of creating content. I laying on my couch and I'm looking at Zillow, goofing around because that's what I do. I look at Zillow. Yeah. And there was this island in the Upper Peninsula that looked beautiful. And So I took a picture of it, a couple of pictures from like the beach and all that. And I was like, I was just goofing around. You know what I mean? And you know, it's an interesting, it's a beautiful picture. And I think I tweeted like, stop scrolling right now or something like that. Which is like, stop what you're doing.
Great hook.
And buy land in the Upper Peninsula with the pictures. And man, that tweet ripped. And this girl actually, the reason it went as far as it did,
became a meme. Other people were doing the same thing.
Yeah,
it became a meme.
It became a meme. Yeah, everybody was like, "Stop scrolling and buy land in Kentucky," you know, or whatever. But this girl, and I got to know her. She is super cool. She, I'm trying to find the tweet. I don't know if it comes up in my highlights or not. I don't think it does. But she wrote this incredible rebuttal. So she quote tweeted it and she wrote, I'm trying to find it.
Like she owns land up there.
No, she's
right?
from the Upper Peninsula. And so
I
I'm from
remember,
Michigan,
I think, reading that one.
Not the UP. You know, we're from Metro Detroit, and then I've got some property near Grand Rapids. But she quote tweeted it and she wrote a whole thread off of it about like how, in her opinion, living in the Upper Peninsula is terrible and how the snow is like, but super funny, like laugh out loud funny. And she even like took my picture and used it in one of the tweets. She's like, "You think this guy knows what the type of shovel they use in the Upper Peninsula, those large scale shovels?" She's like, "You think he even knows what that is?" This guy, you know, my lawyer headshot, you know, roasted me. And that got like 23 million impressions of her roasting.
Wow.
I don't even think it would have gone nearly as far if it wasn't for me getting roasted in the process, like in a very public way, like just massive, huge ratio, enormous ratio.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's the social media world we live in. It's, I don't know, it's just fun. But you were going to ask one final question?
No, I mean, think just final takeaways for the audience. But I think we've given them so many good nuggets that we could probably just end here. And I really appreciate you coming on. And where can people find you? I know we've talked a lot about Twitter, but where can people find you?
We're up to 15 likes. This 16. We're cooking. We got
this
comments.
Is great.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 comments. Maybe there's something to it, man. Maybe my content has just evolved forever into. Yeah, this it's cooking. It's up to 18 likes. It's really catching on.
That's great.
At SMB Attorney on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. My name's Eric Pacifici. SMB Law Group is our website. Feel free to reach out anytime if there's anything we can do to help.
Awesome. Yep. Thanks, Eric, for coming on. This has been awesome.
For sure. Thanks.